All right, hello everyone. This is John S. Rhodes of the Rhodes Brothers. This is Greater Wealth Through Mastery. The topic of today's short talk is banks buying Bitcoin and what you need to know. Now, I promised to tell you about two mega banks buying Bitcoin. I'm going to give you facts and data. There's going to be no guessing at all. Before I do that, however, I'm going to tell you about my first exposure to Bitcoin. When I first bought Bitcoin, I bought some directly, and then I left it in a wallet online. I did not store it locally in any way. Things have changed dramatically since that point in time, but that was my first buy. Just sort of bought and left it on the exchange. The second time, the next evolution was buying Bitcoin through Grayscale's GBTC. That was the only way to buy Bitcoin through the stock market. I took some money that I had invested in the stock market and I bought GBTC. So those are my first two exposures to buying Bitcoin. And what I have learned since that time is over the top, incredible, insane, and I'll talk more about that in a future episode. But for now, what I really want you to know about that little story is that now more than ever, it's easy to buy Bitcoin, number one, and number two, the government is getting out of the way. So the reason I told you that little story and about the government getting out of the way is that these two banks I'm going to tell you about further reinforce the critical idea, the essential point that the government is, yes, regulating, yes, sticking their fingers in the pie, yes, stirring things up, absolutely true, but they are also, in effect, getting out of the way. I wouldn't say they're endorsing Bitcoin, but they're coming to grips with the fact that tens of millions of Americans, at least, and who knows how many around the world exactly, just tens of millions of Americans own Bitcoin and they're a real constituency. So there's some real insight there. Okay, now let's review the very big news and how all this comes together. I need to read some notes here. I printed them out for you. So the two big banks, cutting right to it, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo are the two latest major global banks to disclose exposure to Bitcoin. Wowzers, right? And that was through buying spot BTC exchange traded funds launched in January. So what that means is that banks are not, these two banks, we're talking JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, are not directly buying Bitcoin according to this news, according to what we found out. Instead, they are buying Bitcoin through exchange traded funds, exactly like you could do right now. Okay, so this is really, really cool. Now, how do I know this? This is what's so awesome. As an investor, I pay very close attention to what companies are doing. And what I did is I called up 13F disclosures. Now, a 13F is, in effect, a quarterly report issued by companies on the stock market. And so when they do that, they have to disclose what it is that they have bought, right? Because they're public companies, they have to publicly disclose what they are doing. And so what's just really amazing is that the 13Fs revealed both JP Morgan and Wells Fargo had bought into these, bought into Bitcoin ETFs, just like you can do. You can buy into the same Bitcoin ETFs that the big boys are buying into. Now, before going on, I want to point something out. This comes from Fintel. Fintel says, over 240 firms have invested in IBIT, and that happens to be BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, IBIT, while over 130 companies have invested in FBTC, that's Fidelity's Bitcoin ETF. More than 467 firms have invested in Grayscale's GBTC. just like me. But GBTC back in the day was more like a mutual fund. When IBIT and FBTC came out, they were true ETFs, exchange traded funds. Okay, so there we go. That's knowledge you can take to the bank. You can play along with the big boys. It is really a big deal. Now, here is the gotcha. Are you ready? This is the gotcha. JP Morgan disclosed $731,000 of spot Bitcoin ETF investments in BlackRock's IBIT, Bitwise's BIBT, or BITB, and Fidelity's FBTC. So I want to say again the dollar amount. JP Morgan disclosed $731,000 of investments in Bitcoin ETFs. That's it. 731,000. Not even $1 million. Dun dun dun. All right. Another thing here. We've got Wells Fargo. Okay, so Wells Fargo reported about $141,000 invested in Grayscale's GBTC during the first quarter of 2024. So, you know, the numbers are small. They are invested. They are barely dipping their toes in the water. So this makes big news because of the following. I've got bad news, good news, and great news, right? Sort of the good, bad, and the ugly, so to speak. So the bad news is it is a pathetic amount of money. It's just a small drip in a vast ocean. These companies, these banks are enormous. They're huge. So these dollar amounts they're pathetic. They truly are. But it's interesting because here's the good news. There's a foot in the door. We're talking about baby steps, and I'm almost positive more money will flow from the banks into these ETFs, and very, very likely they'll start trying to figure out how to acquire Bitcoin directly. I'm sure they can do it, and they might even hold it for you. They might try to be holding Bitcoin for you in the future. That will be future news. I can almost guarantee it. So that's the good news, is that it is a foot in the door. The great news is that retail investors should feel way more comfortable, because every time there's more news like this, it tells us that there's more acceptance. It tells us that the government, while very much involved, is out of the way enough that allows retail investors, little mom and pops, right? Individuals like you and I, it allows us to continually acquire Bitcoin if that's what we wish to do. Is the market free and open? I'll let you decide that. But at least we have the opportunity to get our hands on Bitcoin directly and indirectly, much, much easier than in the past. So I know that the government is watching and the government is involved, but they're not killing Bitcoin. I think that's the big story here, is that the government is not regulating Bitcoin to death. The government has not stopped Bitcoin, and it probably cannot at this point in time. You know, that ship has sailed. And your opportunity to do what I call front running the big banks and the big money with Bitcoin, it is still upon us now. It is still possible to do that now. You can do it now if you would like to do that. It's not investment advice whatsoever, but if you were going to buy Bitcoin sooner rather than later, does make sense for these reasons. So very, very exciting, great stuff. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. My brother Matt Rhodes watches the comments very closely, as do I. All right, does this line up with your own personal experience as well? And again, let us know in the comments below. Please send this episode to someone who you think will get tremendous value out of it. You're doing them a favor when you forward this on to others. And as always, the Rhodes Brothers do appreciate your support. and we will definitely see you in the next video. Thank you.